Now to the artist Modupeola Fadugba, whose unique style is characterized by an unusual combination of exhibitions, essays, talks, games, performances, mentorship programs, murals and videos, all of them attempting to illuminate problems in education, politics and governance through art. Sounds enormously rich, doesn't it? It's called The Artist's Algorithm: Why Nations Win, and it's in part inspired by the African Renaissance theory, a belief in the cultural, scientific and economic renewal of post-colonial African nations. But then it's also a place for dreams, games and the provocative power of play, to quote the artist herself. And it all came in a burst of inspiration inside the Smithsonian Museum of African Art, surrounded by paintings, sculpture, artifacts and a sort of Aboriginal style dreamtime immersion into hidden histories. Take a listen.
Have you ever wondered who made the rules in the game of life? Who established the hierarchies between men and women, rich and poor, young and old, a government and its citizens, between love and fear? If you were the ultimate creator, how would you make the universe? As an artist, how would you reimagine the future? At the start of 2020, I found myself locked inside the Smithsonian Museum of African Art overnight. This, by the way, is a true story. Quarantined in the museum, I had an encounter with God, I guess, and a few other creators. As I walked through several rooms encountering paintings, sculptures, and artifacts, they revealed hidden histories and dreams for the future. I envisioned the rising and falling apart of African nations and civilizations, and where we stand now. I thought to myself, what algorithm can we use to restructure our stories? What would it take for us all to swim, to win? This is the Artist's Algorithm. It's a series of education-centered exhibitions, games, talks, and interventions that will initiate dialogue about African artists, materials, and history.
Well, to attempt to better grasp the concept of the artist's algorithm, I'm suitably delighted to say that its creator, the artist Modupeola Fadugba, joins me now from our studios in Lagos. Very interesting indeed, Modupeola. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let me start from that video itself, because I'm curious, as an artist, it sounds like you see yourself as a sort of mini or micro creator, and so if you extrapolate from that to a macro level creator, you could reimagine the world and even perhaps the universe. Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's absolutely accurate. I think to your point about imagining the universe, when I first started thinking about the idea of an algorithm, I was actually inspired by a concept. It's a mathematical concept called God's algorithm, and it refers to the fastest way that you can solve any given puzzle. And so if you take the Rubik's Cube, for example, there's like a optimal solution for you to get from all the faces being like multicolored to the rectified sort of blue face, orange face, white, yellow, and so on and so forth. And so the artist's algorithm is my way of reimagining what the world would look like if artists who are in many ways visionaries and have to think about how to turn vision into real life. Like, how do you operationalize that, so to speak? How do you systemize that? How do you document that and then communicate it at scale? So that's what the artist's algorithm is, and it's fitting that it would require exhibitions, talks, games, performances, and multimedia to effectively communicate that message.
And now that we're on that trajectory of the artist's algorithm, where did the idea come from?
So as we saw in the video, I was quite humorously locked in the Smithsonian Museum overnight last year at the beginning, right before the pandemic. And it just got me thinking about sort of the beginning of time and creation and what maybe the end of time would look like, what the end of civilization would look like if it were. And I do think it's fitting that artists are sort of getting their due spotlight and recognition. It's not only a celebrated concept to be an artist, but there's room to have impact, and people are paying attention to artists and artist stories and how they are communicating really important messages artistically.
And of course, you mentioned God there, and knowing Nigeria, as I'm sure you do, the minute you mention God, everybody wants to listen in. So you talked about having an encounter with God and a few other creators at that museum. Tell us about that encounter.
I was on my own. My phone was dead. And I had no way of communicating with the outside world. And I don't know if that happens to people often now. We're always sort of plugged in on our phones, always connected in one way or the other. And so for the first time in a really long time, it was just me and my own thoughts and I guess my creator. And there is an interesting play on the word creators there because I was surrounded by artworks from multiple African artists, contemporary artists and all sorts of artists and artifacts as well. And just thinking through that really rudimentary or primary way of communicating with others and creation at its core, sort of like what's core to creation. And just thinking through how I could do that within my career. At the time, I had taken a bit of a break from the art world, and I was thinking through how I could sustainably move my career forward and what it would take to build a vision around that. And so I guess back to your question about God, it's an interesting idea to have as a creator, to be moved by your intuition and have and be guided sort of spiritually in your creative process. But the algorithm and the idea of structuring that really comes to almost sort of the management side of an artist's practice, how those interplay with one another and how an artist can oversee all the various aspects of the practice and communicate it at scale.
Very interesting, and it sounds like an exhibition, well, a series of exhibitions actually worth seeing. But just to try and go from the abstract to the practical, why did you choose the title, The Artist's Algorithm, Why Nations Win?
So that's a really good question. I was born in Togo, and I grew up partly in the States, partly in the UK, in Rwanda, Tanzania, and effectively moved to Nigeria as an adult. But one of the questions that always stuck with me as I moved through these various spaces was, it was always like a persistent question: why are some nations doing well and happen to prosper, and others maybe continue to stay in a failed state? And so even as a child, from 4 or 5 years old, these were observations that I made. And even now as an adult in my life and in my practice, it's a question that I want to explore. So in even the subsequent exhibitions, you'll see that I will come back to this central question: why nations win? And it was also partly inspired by a text, Why Nations Fail, by Darren Asegmalu and James Robinson. And it speaks to ideas around institutions, the need for countries to build institutions and be inclusive rather than extractive. It looks at the education systems of countries and how they incentivize their populations to innovate and to act communally.
Okay, well, just stay with that thought. We're going to come back and finish it, but we're going to take a break. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our attempts to reimagine the future with the artist's algorithm and the extraordinary visionary world of Modupeola Fadugba. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Aniegolu. Now, as we continue challenging perceptions of Africa through art, my guest today is the creator of the Artist Algorithm project, Modupeola Fadugba. It's a series aiming to show how Miss Fadugba is giving the African world a fresh perspective, challenging the way we look at things, from the ancient African kingdoms of yore to the booming cultural scenes of today. If you've ever wondered who made the rules in the game of life, who established the hierarchies between men and women, rich and poor, young and old, governments and citizens, then you've got to enter the extraordinary world of Miss Fadugba, who, as the artistic creator, would remake the world and reimagine the future with her artist algorithm. And Modupeola Fadugba is still with me from our studios in Lagos. Thank you for staying with us. And before we went on the break, you were telling us why you chose the title The Artist Algorithm, Why Nations Win. Tell us more.
Yeah, I was just talking about the fact that why nations win has been a persistent question just in my life, having grown up in multiple countries and wondering what it takes to create a nation. And to your earlier question about what it means to create something on a macro level versus a micro level, I decided to kind of extrapolate that and focus on the individual, right? Nations are made up of individuals, and so in the journey of creating the artist algorithm, I've had to ask myself, what is the change that I wish to see in the world, and to effectively start with me. It's a difficult task to do, but I think it's really necessary for each person, artist or not, to try to present and represent the change that they want to see in the broader world, in their communities and in their nations as well. So that's also what the artist algorithm aims to do. As I share the experiences that I've had, it's been quite transformative for me in the last 3 years creating this project at this level, and what I hope will translate at scale as well. So I have a lot to share, even just sort of personally.
Well, I mean, it sounds like an enormous job, but it clearly one that is hugely fulfilling. I can see how you sort of animate and light up when you're talking about it. And in order to highlight what you're setting out to communicate, because obviously it has to be communicated to an audience, presumably there are elements of the exhibition that are crucial and especially significant.
Definitely. And I would say that, I mean, so many, but I think I could start with the People's Algorithm, and that's a game that I created in 2014 as an entry into the National Art Competition with the African Artists Foundation, supported by Nigerian breweries at the time. And it's that game, you walk into it, there's a huge Rubik's Cube, and a player is supposed to walk into this Rubik's Cube, which represents the Nigerian education system and all of its challenges and opportunities. And so one might discover that there are over 20 million unemployed young people in Nigeria, and they're posed with the question, what do we do about this? And what are the implications currently of having 20 million unemployed or underemployed young people in the country? And what are the opportunities that presents? You might also walk into the game as a student and be faced with challenges around university strikes. And so you roll a dice and the game tells you to take 3 steps back, which represents a huge delay, and it's something that is really common to the Nigerian university student struggle, having even struggled to get a university in the first place, right? With mass examination failure, with JAMB, and various examinations that make it difficult for students to enter into university in the first instance, and then facing university strikes and having one's life trajectory effectively delayed by 2 to 3 years because of these strikes. But the game also looks at the other side, right, of why are people striking? It looks at teachers not being paid enough, not being paid on time, and allows even the student to have some level of empathy for the teachers and university professors that are constantly going on strike. And then it also challenges the administrators that should be overseeing all of these challenges and learning from the data as it comes, and trying to better the entire system.
Well, I have to say that's an absolutely brilliant analysis that you've just given, and also the way that you're interpreting it artistically. I mean, I think that's just absolutely superb. But I came across one of your works titled Like Play, which explores play as a form of resistance to the suppression of freedom of expression. I mean, that sounds fairly deep, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely. I was trying to use, our own Nigerian parlance, like play, because I am talking about very serious issues, and I'm trying to approach it in a playful way, in a way that says, let's look at this, let's even laugh about it, let's create a game that almost looks ridiculous, but they are mirroring the realities, the statistical realities of the Nigerian education system and economic situation. And so, yeah, the idea of using play is almost a bit of a veneer to then talk about more serious issues. And obviously, like play, it's a way of saying that something is happening gradually and nobody realizes that it's going to have a very important or significant outcome until it happens, right? And then it's almost too late. So it's also saying, well, let's look at these things as they're happening, small by small, like play, before it's too late.
Yes, very, very interesting. And just moving away a little bit from the specific sort of artist's algorithm to get a sense of who you are, where you've come from, who you are today, and how you got there. Just tell us a bit about yourself.
So like I said, I was born in Togo. I have a mentor, a professor, who each time he introduces me to people, he says, you can't introduce, Modupeola without talking about her parents. So I am the daughter of two diplomats that worked in the United Nations. They were working for the Criminal Tribunal in Rwanda. And so I think from a really young and early age, I've thought about ideas of justice and social issues. They've just been a part of the language that I've grown up around, and thinking through Africa and the idea of an African Renaissance. Living in Rwanda when I was 11 years old, I saw the aftermath of the Rwanda genocide. But now I'm 36, and it's amazing to me that in my short lifetime, Rwanda as a country has seen such great transformation. And so things like that from my childhood inspire me to hope for Nigeria, to hope for other African nations. And this ideal of a renaissance is very real to me. And it's expressed in my works. What else can I say about myself? I like ice cream. I like ice cream. Something a bit lighter, right, than genocides and war. Anything else?
Well, I mean, to be fair, I'm also guilty. I like ice cream. I rather favor vanilla, just plain vanilla, though, and maybe a chunky monkey occasionally. But I mean, I expect you've been asked this question lots of times. I mean, with a background in education, economics, and engineering, how did you end up as an artist?
Honestly, I just had a bit of an epiphany. It happened on a whim. It was going to just be a one-year experiment, being an artist, living as an artist. And I decided to try it out, and I gave it my all. After studying these three very sort of disparate disciplines. And I think even within my art practice, there are traces of engineering and statistics, economic issues that I have discussed or described. And even with education, I think my life's work as an artist is to educate. And we haven't talked about the swimmers, but I've been using the metaphor of swimming and swimmers to to really highlight ideas around education, what it means to be a lifelong student, and what it means to constantly want to learn and then teach others, teach communities and empower other communities as one learns to swim. And so as much as I am an artist, I still feel like I'm drawing from the different disciplines that I've formally trained in to spread my message.
Yes, really fascinating stuff. And just coming back to your artist's algorithm, of course, beyond the bigger, all-encompassing themes of life that you tend to sort of get into. I mean, you mentioned also issues such as education, politics, governance in that exhibition or series of exhibitions. And these are apart from being universal to all societies, are particularly relevant to Africa, aren't they?
Sure. Definitely. And I think even within the algorithm, one of the things that I would suggest for success of a person or even within a nation is to celebrate events within a person's life or within a nation's sort of lifespan. And one of the works that really means a lot to me and will continue to appear in subsequent exhibitions is a painting that features the face of the late Dr. Stella Ameyo Adadevoh, who in 2014 effectively risked her life to avert what would have then been really like a global pandemic with Ebola. And I will continue to bring out that image to celebrate her legacy. And even though I really appreciated and wanted to celebrate her then in 2014 when I first started using her image, I think in light of a global pandemic now, we, not only as a country, but as the world, can better understand what that sacrifice meant and what a winning moment it is for us as Nigerians and even Africans, because had that disease, just arguably more deadly than COVID-19, for example, had it spread to the rest of the world, it would have just been just more unnecessary, bad sort of press for Africa, not just Nigeria. And so I think about the counterfactual, what could have happened, and what a great legacy she's left for us as Nigerians, but also as Africans.
Yes, I am rather inclined to agree with you. So really your work is a series of interpretations on what it means to be African today. I mean, if that's not an oversimplification. We've got about a minute or so, a minute and a half left. I mean, where next and what next in the odyssey of the artist's algorithm?
1 minute. So we just had a performance in Newburgh, New York, with a group of young teenage dancers at the Boys and Girls Club, performing to a song that I wrote with Mr. Incredible, M.I., that's Jude Abaga, about 4 years ago. And so they're dancing and performing and talking about what it means to be an artist. So that's in New York, taking place right now until December 18th. The Why Nations Win exhibition is still taking place online. There's a virtual exhibition at theartistsalgorithm.com. And hopefully in 2022, we will see the Artist Algorithm launching in Senegal, in Dakar. So you're all invited, and we're doing our best to do a lot on social media, so you can follow along there as well.
To you, and keep doing what you're doing. Modupeola Fadugba is the creator of the Artist Algorithm, and she was talking to me there from our studios in Lagos.